this video is about the Nomad, which is my personal favourite, I have to admit, of all of them, largely because visually as well as in construction it really does fit the Mini Land Rover bill perfectly. Underneath the alloy body panels lies a multitubular chassis which was heavily rust proofed and rust treated before the body panels went on. In fact, it is said, although I'm not entirely sure, having not had a close look at a chassis, that John Foers, who designed the car and a very talented engineer in his own right, decided to use U-section steel rather than box section, rather like the Triumph Herald, which allowed him to reach all the nooks and crannies and treat every single surface of the chassis with the rust protection. And this is borne out by the fact that of all the Mini-based utilities, you can probably see quite a few Nomads still around. Not least even if they I remember one in a back garden in Bangor-on-Dee in North Wales. It's probably still there now with a tree growing out of the middle of it. I mean, it broke my heart, but the owner was adamant that one day he would get it back on the road, and it you know, just a testimony for how tough these things were. But let's go back to the beginning and look at the Foers Nomad. Foers, of course, referring to John Foers, the designer and engineer who created the models, and he had quite a rich engineering history behind him when he decided to, you know, start making cars. And this was pretty much a part-time project to start with in 1975, and initially the cars weren't sold as kits at all. They were all sold as turnkey cars and by word of mouth, and they found a lot of popularity amongst the local farming community, John being based in South Yorkshire. In fact, when he eventually did set up Foers Engineering, it was in Rotherham in South Yorkshire, and as well as the Nomad, he initially started producing a rather successful range of trailers as well, which complemented the car. And it was only towards the end of the 70s that he went all in and full time producing the Nomad kit alongside the trailers. Now the story really starts getting attention from all the national kit car mags and the local press, and the car has started to build up sales. But the story really gets interesting around 1981 when the Duke of Hamilton discovers the car and is very enthusiastic and gets involved with the business with John Foers, and he sees this as an opportunity to produce cars in Argyll in Scotland and create local jobs. Now this was probably the boom period for the business. The grille got an update with some slatted grills rather than the more basic original version, and variations included a pickup, which was useful for the farming community. There was a van version, which in itself was again useful for the farming and small business community, and an estate version, which was seen as sort of the family option, but with the seats folded down, you still got a square meter of load space in the back of the car. So it really was a utilitarian vehicle that was extremely useful and popular, and it became you know, a bit of a cult amongst the owners of the cars. Became quite ardent in their support for the marque and the cars themselves. Now, an interesting story that I was told was that of Hamilton and John were scratching their heads over the hardtop of the saloon estate van version, and the reason why it looks like a Land Rover in miniature is because The roof of the hardtop was actually a mould taken from a Land Rover, then it was cut and shut to fit the Nomad, and hey presto, you really did have a mini Land Rover roof on the mini Land Rover Nomad. And it's one of the more distinctive features of the car in its own right, which is, you know, adds to the reason why it's so endearing. Now, John and the Duke didn't sit on their haunches and rely purely on the Nomad. Developments carried on apace, and in 1983, I think it was, they developed a metro-based sister model. It wasn't a replacement because the Nomad carried on in production, but the sister model was called the Triton, and this was seen as, if you like, the more suburbanized version of the Nomad. It had slightly less aggressive styling. It had mini metro donor, which meant that it had the hydrogas suspension, which meant that it had a slightly softer ride, which was the only real criticism you could make of the mini based Nomad, because it really was, you know, a bit bouncy inside that. But the Triton tried to address this. It was a longer wheelbase. It was seen as a softer version, if you like, a more mature version. And unfortunately, amongst the Nomad aficionados or Foers aficionados, the Triton's been looked down on somewhat, but I rather like them. And I remember when I was working as a volunteer on the Talyllyn Railway in the mid-80s, one of the volunteers, I never did work out who it was, had a Foers Nomad, and they were very happy with it. It was always there every summer. It was perfect for railway life, being, like I said, the mini Land Rover, and everyone stopped and had a look at it. It was you know, quite an unusual car to see around, and that was again one of the appeals of these cars. But the developments didn't stop there. The company took a giant leap into the off-road extremes by producing the Ibex. Now, the Ibex in itself is worthy of a story because it's still in production today, and you know, in itself there's you know, quite a history. Not least the Duke of taking the prototype and doing some record runs with the car. But the Ibex was basically moved really right over to Land Rover Defender components, and it was the Land Rover Plus. It had much sharper approach and departure angles. It was much more utilitarian even than the Land Rover donor car, and it was basically seen as the extreme off-roader option. It was, when your Land Rover couldn't quite go there, you bought yourself a Foers Ibex. And Ibex are still in production now with John Foers' son at the helm, and very successful they are too. In fact, with all the hype going on around the Ineos Grenadier, it's easy to forget that there is another utilitarian British built 4x4 and sometimes 6x4 model which is extremely successful in its own right. And as I said, that is a story in its own right. I'm not sure if it counts as a kit car anymore because most of them have been turnkey, but then it's going back to the roots because the original Nomads, as I said, were all produced as turnkey cars. It was only later on that John started selling them as a kit. And yeah, the Foers Nomad and the Foers company. Now the Ibex, by the way, is back in South Yorkshire, so everything's come back full circle. So thank you for taking the time to listen. If you've enjoyed the video, please click on like. It does help us with the algorithm. Steve and I are not exactly sure how it works, but all the experts say that it really does help both channels. Please please subscribe to both channels, Enwins Motors and TKC Magazine's YouTube channel, because it really does help us, you know, to produce these videos for you, and also it helps generate awareness of what we're doing and allows us to keep going. And as well as that, please share this link, tell your friends about it, draw more people in, and you know, you'll be doing us a real service. Really, we're both sort of drawing up lists now of cars that we both want to do the history of, and hope you enjoy them, and we certainly enjoy doing them. So I look forward to seeing you with the next one.